next session, which will surely bring some smiles to our investor community. The exits. It goes without saying that creating successful exits is an integral part of any venture capital investing. So far, IvyCap has exited 6 office portfolio companies and also created India's first dragon, a species rarely found in VC portfolios. Our next panel discussion is on creating successful exits, and it focuses on how the founders and VC funds work cohesively with each other throughout the investment cycle to create such exits. The session will be moderated by Mr. Ashish Wadhwani. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our panelists, Mr. Rahul Dash, founder of Purplle, Mr. Harmeet Bindra, founder of Leixir, Mr. Ashish Anubhav Sokrati, Mr. Srinivas Rao, founder of Aujas, and Mr. Pankaj Vermani, founder of Clovia. Pankaj will be joining us virtually. Hi, Pankaj.
Hey, hi.
Pankaj is joining us from... So, Pankaj, I know you are in Ibiza party, and I'm so sorry to spoil your party, but all I can say is thank you so much for joining us for the panel today.
Not at all. It's an absolute delight.
So, Ashish, stage is all yours.
Thank you, Mansi. So, exits is actually the final validation for any fund over its life cycle. Because finally, it is cash to be returned to investors. That's from a fund perspective. And from an entrepreneur perspective, it's a very personal event because you've built something, it's your own baby, whom you are letting go. In some cases, not all. So I don't think we have formally done this, and I would really like to do this. These gentlemen have played a huge role in the success of IvyCap, and I really want all of us to formally thank them for their immense contribution over the years. Thank you. So let's start, with the exit decision, right? Why did you decide to exit when you did? And I'll start with Harmeet. Because Harmeet is a veteran, so he's smiling because he's done it the third time. So
yeah, I was about to start. It's probably out of habit.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, I've had 3 exits actually, and Ashank, I don't know if you remember, but started my journey. My first venture was Leixir, where we represented Mastec in Indonesia. So hi to you. So yeah, built my first venture, Leixir, which is an IT services business. Had an exit there. That exit was more, and I think, to me, exit is an event, right? It's just part of that journey for a business. And as an entrepreneur, you just as it's growing a business is like growing your own kid, right? So, you decide what's a time when you have to let it go, because that's good for the business, right? And that's the way I've looked at it always. So whether it was Leixir or whether it was Sovox, which was my renewable business, or Leixir now, I think that's always been the key. Just continue to do well for all stakeholders and take decisions that are best in everybody's interest.
Anubhav, what is your perspective on Sokrati?
No, I think Harmeet has a point there. There comes a point in the life cycle of the business where you believe that getting a partner who's maybe larger than you is a better way to grow the business. And for us, that's what we've been able to accomplish actually. Like we've grown like 10 times, I think, over the last 4-5 years post-exit. And hindsight, of course, it looks like a great decision, but that's the bet that you have to take at any point, right? And really that was one of the driving decisions. Of course, the other thing that as a founder you have to deal with a little bit, and we're not serial ones like Harmeet yet, but is the point about letting the baby go, right? So you have to be comfortable with the idea that you're going to lose some control over what you've spent so much time and energy building. As long as you're comfortable with those two things, things are great.
But you took a strategic call, right? At least for Sokrati, that you saw changes in the landscape and you said this is the right time. So just walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, see, I think my general take is the right time is a thing that you fit in hindsight. But as I think they say, there is a gut feeling that we're probably facing friction, or we want to do do it in a different way. We want to have a part. Like for us, I think the discussion was having a partner which helped us grow faster than we were growing. Right, like we were growing at I think 30% at that point, and it wasn't exciting enough. So we wanted to get a partner who helped us grow much faster. And that was the thinking that drove it. And of course, there are all of these other things like returning the money to the fund, hopefully getting some money in the bank for us. So, I mean, those things exist, but it's also a decision for the company and for the betterment of the company, right? If you really believe that it's going to help. But the story always fits in hindsight. I don't think it's a forward-looking story. It's just so clear.
So just don't romanticize it, just very rational and cut and dry. Rao, what can you share from your
I think it's a combination of several things. So in our case, as you know, you will remember Ashish, we had one investor who came in at idea stage, and then of course you guys came in 5 years later. So I think reconciling expectations of early stage investors versus investors who came in later, that's one part. Second is at some point you realize you probably need some other shoulders to lean on to scale to the next level. So obviously there's a need to find a good home for what you've built. I think you made the point that every business you build is like a baby. So you want to make sure if you decide to move on, you leave it in good hands, right? You have a responsibility to your investors, to your customers, as well as the people who work with you. So I think it's a combination of several of these things.
Pankaj, coming to you, I think I want you to cover not just the business reason, but what it personally meant for you. And to be honest, there was no real reason for you to exit, but because you were and you are still growing phenomenally well. So how did you make that happen?
So I think Rao puts in a very interesting, verbiage to the whole thing. So exactly the same thing. Your destination for us was fairly clear. The idea was that 40 to 50 million women is what we have to reach as fast as possible. And then it was more a decision of direction. It's more a decision. How do you know that you have to grow and scale the business to a certain level. Now, you could do it yourself with more of your own resources, and it would take a little longer. Or else, you could kind of unlock some value, which could kind of help you do that much faster. So I think it was for us, it wasn't a decision of direction. It was a decision of the route to kind of, reach to that destination. And I think you guys were equally party to that conversation, and all kudos to you, to at least give me that opportunity to decide which direction we guys wanted to take. Yeah.
So let's come to the point that I think some of you have alluded to, and in terms of aligning investors, and some come in early, some come in late, some have a longer time frame to go, some have a shorter, and I think that's one theme that came out. And just walk us through what were the lessons and what best should be done, or what are the lessons from that? What can you take away from for others' sake? What can others take away from that?
I think so. We haven't exited the business yet.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to actually come back to you because for you it's an issue of managing the cap table, and I'll cover that separately for you. Yeah.
No, so I think, to me, as I said, I mean, I look at exit as an event in a journey, right? So even when it comes to investors, I think right from the time of getting the right investor on your cap table and then engaging with an investor along the way, right? Because I'm a big believer of both making sure that you bring on a team that, whether it's your own team or the team of investors, you bring on people who kind of believe in your philosophy of how you're managing the business. Because if there is a disconnect there, then there'll be disconnect at every stage. And if you connect at the whole thesis of what you're doing as business, and again, business is unpredictable, right? Because both internally and external environment, and you keep everybody informed and on the same page, then I think exit is again an event because you've discussed this, you know why you're doing it, and you know what is in the best interest. And it's not just about making money, right? It has to be in the best interest of the employees. It has to be for all stakeholders. So I think that's really been my thesis all along.
So stakeholder alignment
Yep.
and do it proactively.
Yep.
Anubhav?
So, see, I think at that point of event, basically, or like in the lead up to the event, basically, you will have, I think Shrikant was mentioning this, right? You'll have investors at different points of time. And in our case, of course, we were very, late. I think we basically almost got an exit within 6 months or a year, or those conversations started happening, I think, once you put in money. You just need to think of the right partner. So if you've chosen a good investor, he, I think, respects the decision, even though it may be a short and it may not necessarily be aligned with the investment thesis. So it all boils down to finding the right investor, in my opinion. And all of these are, in some ways, events, but business as usual decisions that you have to end up taking one point or the other. But the one thing is, and I think it's easier said than done, but like really just sit down together and have a conversation. A lot of the stuff is just about having those tough conversations. They're not fun necessarily, but just sitting in a room and saying that we'll hash it out together. Most times, at least we found success with taking an approach like that. So it, boils down to just being rational again.
I think things become simpler when you just get higher valuation. Everybody is happy to exit as well. So that make your life simple for everyone.
Yeah, it's almost like you're suggesting that.
So celebrate that exit together, right?
Rao?
Yeah, I think broadly I'll echo what he said, which is it's just about finding the right time. And I think they tell you, right. You just wake up one day, then you think, okay, I think this is, you should move on when people ask you why and not why not. Right? So,
Pankaj, how about you?
I think the toughest part is that there are no rights or wrongs in this, right? I think the bottom line is that entrepreneur has to be true to the business, and the investors who help build it. I disagree, Harmeet. I think higher valuation is not enough to satisfy people. I think it kind of only leads to even more higher expectations. So, but yeah, I think at the end of the day, as I said in first answer, it just boils down to what direction the business is taking. Because the person who is at the engine, who's basically who's in the cockpit, at the end of the day is the person whose belief and meaning the investors' resources has brought the business to this level. So if the belief is going elsewhere, the resources will not be able to support that. I think that's one reality that everybody eventually gets aligned into, and I think that kind of also helps to kind of take the logical decisions together.
Rahul, I wanted to come back to you and save this question for you, because I think you started with a very large pool of angels on your cap table. And I think one point that's mentioned is you need to sort of investors coming in different stages. And I think to some extent you've done a phenomenal job. I don't know whether it's accidental or whether I think it's proactive, but it's maybe benefit of hindsight. You can say you did it for the right reasons. But how do entrepreneurs need to manage their cap table proactively so that you don't create these points of misalignment between investors and don't hamper the growth of the company? Because if you hamper the growth of the company, ultimately valuation gets hit and it's sort of suboptimal for everyone. So how did you manage it for Purplle?
I think in our case, we believe in absolute transparency to take care of expectations. And that's been, and in a lot of scenarios, that transparency doesn't help the short-term conversations at all, because then the person sitting in front of you is not expecting you to be that open with respect to what you're feeling and how you want the business to go. So that's been one thing that we've done with everybody who's been part of Purplle, whether it's investors, angel, institutions, our employees, and so on and so forth. So that's helped. Second, in all of these scenarios, we've ended up. I believe that we've ended up being fair and ethical in most circumstances. And when you do that consistently for a period of time, there is a certain expectation built that, okay, theek hai, sambhal lenge, or something of that nature, which is very, very helpful grease when it comes to any conversation that you're having with anyone. We were very fortunate to have people who believed. You could still have people who don't believe. So that worked in our favor. And beyond that, this entire journey, if I may, you're always looking forward, right? You're looking the next 5 years or 10 years. So that while, partnerships which were very, very relevant last 5 years, and you're super grateful for that partnership, might not be as relevant from both of your standpoints for the next 5 or 10 years, which is what you do with cap table realignment or with angels exiting at the opportune time, and so on and so forth. I think these three, as long as we kind of do these conversations around this, more broadly it has worked out in our favor.
And if I may prompt you in that journey, I think you, with every successive exits for your previous stage, you also leveraged that opportunity to bring a new set of investors who took you on to the next leg. So can you talk us through that effort?
So till about 2019, I would say, in bits and pieces, we didn't have the privilege as an organization to be very choosy and about where do we get the capital from. And once we kind of got into a certain zone, it's been slightly easier when you're talking to investors and all of that. In a lot of scenarios, what ends up happening in a business like ours is when you're not consuming that kind of capital, and you have these buckets of capital, या तो आप 20 million raise कर रहे हो, या कुछ लोग हैं जो 100 million ही करते हैं, and so on and so forth. You don't need 100 million. At that point in time, what do you do? So what we have done is we've kind of ensured that the expectation setting happens in a way that that we've done a primary, secondary to manage this entire scenario, specifically when the pools of capital are increasing day by day, and as a business we don't really burn through capital. So that's one thing that we've done effectively in our business, and we've been able to get very large long-term capital plays onto our cap table, which has worked in our favor, because we, in our head, post 2017-18, I would very frankly say, post 17-18, we also started looking at building this business out for 20 years, 25 years. Because of the structure that a venture capital fund follows, that's not really, you can't line with someone for 20, 25 years. So you need to, and you have taken money from someone. So yeah, we come from middle class background. पैसा लिया है तो पैसा वापस तो करना ही है. There is no other way to look at this. Right? It's a burden on our head, which is why every time we have this conversation, ki whether we should take 25 million more, it's not an easy conversation to have. We don't want to take that money. So, so that also plays in terms of how your upbringing has been as a founder and what culture you're propagating in your organization. So all of these plays with investors, right? Investors know, they see you, they see you working hard throughout the journey. Most people, there is a human element to who you are connecting with as an individual. There is a general partner sitting at the other end. It's not an institution, it's a person. वो बंदे के साथ आपको क्या equation है? It's a very important part to this entire whatever works out, irrespective of paperwork. We have done deals irrespective of paperwork, and you've been part of some of them. We've gone through, sometimes gone back and and said, okay, not possible, can do only this much, as long as it's fair to the entire ecosystem. So that's the way we have done that. And now, thankfully, we have very large investors who have come in because our old investors have been very, very forthcoming to enable some of that for the next 5-10 years, and IvyCap being one of them. Thankfully, the outcome of that is that we were a fairly good exit for the Fund 1 investment, but it's kind of worked out well in these scenarios. That's what my feeling.
I think a lot of very soft but very important points: trust, relationship, communication. But you know, I noticed that all of you, I think you haven't exited, but all of you seem to say that you know we had to go and, as if you have to go and convince the investor. I would have thought it's the other way around. Investor ko exit chahiye. I don't want an exit. So looks like you went through a personal decision making first and then decided. So what was it like for you personally to reach that point to say, yes, I need an exit? You know, because the convincing the investor only happens when you are convinced.
Sure. I mean, so in my case, you know, running a business, you know, in terms of Leixir, you know, all of the business was sitting in the US. You know, I was a CEO trying to manage that business from 8,000 miles away. You know, it's, you know, initially you enjoy picking, you know, taking that flight back and forth, and you do like 8 trips in a year, then you do 6, then you do 4 in a year, and then you say, oh my God, how many more do I have to do, right? And then you're obviously, you know, in our model, we had bought these businesses in the US. In fact, the whole model was around buying these literally cottage industry, you know, convert that both on a manufacturing side, put 3D printing in, disrupt the market through digital technology in terms of what you wanted to connect. A lot of that, what we were building, were back in India, right? So you had a team that you had to build from scratch organically in India. All of your growth was coming from the US. So it got to a point where, if I have to say, I've got to be honest with what is required for the business, it required a CEO to be based in the US. And personally, I don't think so. I was committed, and you saw, we went through one of the rounds where the investor was willing to give us a bunch of money, literally, and I'm sure, you know, I don't know how you guys felt about it, but I literally told him, listen, I can say yes to you now, and you're literally telling me, you know, as long as you do it in 2 years, Harmeet, we are good with it, but I know I'm not going to do it, so I'm not going to tell you, I'll take your money, and in 2 years' time, I'm going to move to the US when I'm not going to move. So I think I completely resonate with what Rahul just said. I mean, I think clearly, you know, having that ethos of saying, listen, we're going to stick to the facts, and we're going to stick and do what is right for the business. And for me, clearly, what the right thing for the business was, and I think this is a conversation we had with you as well, that even from an investor perspective, it was important to have a private equity based out of the US. Ours was a US business. And even given my own previous experience that I've had with my IT services business, I take a lot of pride in saying those strategic sales, but even those strategic guys, even till today, keep that brand. So you kind of you've created a brand, even, you know, you've worked on it for 15 years, somebody much bigger than you has bought it out, has not merged that brand with yours, just shows that what kind of brand you've actually created, that it has gone on and survived another 15 years when I moved on to 2 other businesses. And I don't know if you know this, Ashish, but to share with you, after we did the Leixir deal, you know, so I still have equity in Leixir, not completely involved, but some equity. So playing a role as an executive chairman. But I've actually gone back, for example, to Comvest, who acquired us, and said, listen, I have a technology business, and you're not the rightful owner for this business, actually, let's split the business. And they've come back and actually said, yes, you know, makes sense. So, and this is like within a year. So I think as long as you let people know, and you're talking to the right people, and they're the right partners, I think you get pretty awesome results out of it.
Anubhav,
So
personally, how did you decide to let the baby go?
So I think there were 2 key, I think, points for us, honestly. I think one was that we realized that there were 2 companies within the one company. There was a technology company which had a very different path to success and a path to exit potentially. And then there was this large services business, and that was again something that just happened to us, not necessarily the intent when we started off. So that was, I think, one important point, and that was a realization, I think, in some ways for us. Of course, I think we had some success on the services side, so we did continue to keep getting offers.
So you just loved one child more than the other.
It was actually more a case of ensuring that both childs had their own success. And we felt that we were actually being unfair to, I think, the technology companies. So somewhere we had to basically take a hard cut and say, in our case, of course, Ashish is the CEO of one, who's my other founder. I'm the CEO of the other one. And we just said that two different companies, let's put closure on one of them because we had offers for one of them, honestly. So that, I think, was an important realization. And that was a trigger for a lot of it. Of course, from there, you have conversations, etc. All of that.
Rao, how did your personal decision making happen?
Actually, there were two pieces to this, right? One was obviously the first set of investors. We were, I think I echo what he said. We are all middle class guys, so we have this thing that we have to make sure they get a reasonable return on the time, patience, and all of that, right? And the money, right? So that was one part. Which is making sure you do the right thing by people. That's one, and I'll echo what he said. Being on a plane 100 to 150 days a year and not being able to relocate to the US was obviously a challenge. And similar, yeah. So you realize, obviously you will do what you can, but it gets to a point where you realize that that model is not sustainable, right? And you will do it like a good professional, but whatever you call it, junoon or passion, is now starting to, is not there. So might as well move on when people ask you why, and instead of why not.
So Pankaj, I've never asked you this, but did Neha convince you or you convinced Neha?
So for us, I think the change was not about giving away the baby. It was just converting ourselves from mommy to nanny, I guess. So in this case, I think what happened was, uh, I remember this one management meeting when all of us, I called everyone very quickly and said, when we really need to talk about this. And literally, of course, one of them came to the meeting much faster because she was in the next room, and rest, of course, took a little time. What it eventually boiled down to was that we did a so what we do in our management group is that we have this voting system and everybody has a veto. So we get like one veto a month. So this time it was like a veto for whoever wants to take it, even if you've lost yours already. And I kind of presented all the pros and cons, in terms of where everybody. So first, we all knew our destination, and as I just spoke, that we said that the journey will take this here and this here, and very surprisingly, it was phenomenal. Everybody was unanimously kind of agreed to this. So it seemed to be pretty much a no-brainer in terms of the shortcut that we could see in terms of reaching out to our vision of 40 to 50 million women. And yeah, so Neha has always been a propellant of reaching out to the maximum number of wardrobes. So she was the easiest one to convince.
Rahul, I want to come back to a point you made about somewhere down the line thinking of 20 years we want to be this, right? Now that's a great vision to have, a great, really long-term vision. And therefore, exits doesn't mean anything to you, or how do you think of exits?
I would differentiate between founder exiting and exiting the business and exit for a venture capital partner that you have or a private equity partner that you have. When it comes to founder exiting the business, we have done a very simple calculation. 58, 60 year में retirement होता है. We are 35, 36 years old. So minus कर दो तो 20, 25 years आ रहा. That's what we're gonna do, because we won't probably get a platform.
Why do you want to retire at 60?
किसी ने बोला हुआ है अभी government mandate कर रहे हैं तो मतलब I'm assuming there is some biological reason why they don't want to do after that, but that's the but jokes aside, so from our perspective we think that there is a platform that you get to create once in your lifetime is what we believe, once or twice maybe if you're super lucky, because luck plays a big role in what we have done. It's not just our hard work. So once you have that platform, you can use that platform to create impact that you wouldn't have been able to create when you were a startup, right? So now we are 10 years old. We have 20 years ahead of us. There is a very high likelihood if we are on the journey, we are able to create large amount of impact, and that's not money or value EV or any of those things. I mean, we are just having a social governance conversation with Smita on the side, and super excited about what we are going to do on the ESG side. So there is a lot that you can do, which you can't do as a smaller platform. That's the basic this thing. Hence the founder alignment. पैसे side में बन जाएंगे is what I feel. The other side of this is VC, where the business is that you have to return capital with a certain IRR at a certain period of time. When you're signing up to a venture capital or a private equity business, you have signed up to that being the business structure. That's as simple as that. So keeping everything else aside, you have to align to that business structure and say, I will figure out a way, or I'll facilitate a way for you guys to make enough money so that this business structure works for you. And that is the philosophy that we keep following. In the same way, what we have tried to do is to ensure that a decent part of our cap table comes from a perpetual capital structure, right? So we now have monies from Premji Invest, which is potentially, I hope it is perpetual. That's what our understanding is. We have the World Invest family invested in us in a big way, which is again slightly more perpetual capital. And we are potentially the first investment of the third fund, that Kedara Capital, which is one of the largest Indian private equity fund. And we have kind of gone ahead and chosen some of these partnerships because of the people who were on the other side, and also because of these timelines. Because if you're the first fund out of a 10 plus 2 year fund, then you maybe have 10 years to execute, which gives us a little more leeway. So from that perspective, I think that's the way we have looked at the timelines and the capital that we get.
No, I think that's really a remarkable lesson for everybody. I think I really like the idea of framing that long-term vision and going out seeking partners and capital with align with your timing and strategy.
Sorry, just one small, if I remember correctly, and you will know this, this is not even public information, we have let go of a higher valuation to look at longer term capital coming on our cap table. It's not an easy conversation to have when you're getting that kind of bullish valuation in the market, but we have ensured that we take the right one, which aligns with us being there for 20 years. That's the way we kind of look at it.
And I think that's an important point. In fact, I want to thank both Ashish and Vikram for that, because, and something, kudos to the IvyCap team. Like, there was going to be a full exit, and there was a full exit on Leixir, and we had an offer which was, of a higher valuation compared to what we finally took. But that was a collective decision we all took, that in the best interest of the business and the employees and the stakeholders, that's what we're going to do. So again, I mean, no, it's been a great teamwork always, and I did want to call this out. Very, very few investors would have done that when you're taking a full exit.
I think when we're looking at exits, I think everyone is thinking money returned, etc., returns, IRR. But one of the remarkable things that I find in many of these businesses and founders sitting here is that even though funds may have exited, or even though they may have sold it to strategics, their respective businesses continue to thrive. So Leixir, for instance, I believe now is the fourth largest dental lab in the US.
Yeah, I mean, we're the fourth largest in the US, top 10 in the world. Yeah. So,
the top 10 dental lab in the world. And even after our exit, it's really good to see that, you've been part of a journey which really leaves a mark for multiple decades. And Anubhav, likewise with Sokrati, it's really thriving under Dentsu, right?
Yes.
And Pankaj, you're sort of, I guess you have a much bigger challenge to meet the ambitions of the Reliance Group, but you have broad shoulders for that, I suppose.
No, we're not complaining at all. We're all good.
Great. So I think this has been a very heartening thing to see, that even though we have exited, all these businesses that we played a role in have such a long-term journey and a life well beyond that. Let me come to the stakeholder part, Harmeet, that you mentioned. I mean, and of course, investors are, looks like, have been generally nice to you for your exits. But how do you manage your organization? Preparing it for the exit, meaning having the right leadership, and also how do you manage people's nervousness around, change of shareholders?
Yeah, I think that's a very critical piece, right? Because clearly, whoever is going to come in would want a stable. I mean, at the end of the day, business is all about the team, and you want team continuity and team motivation to continue even after the transaction happens. In my case, it was a little simpler because at least they knew that, okay, Harmeet is not like kind of walking out of it completely. So at least there was a continuation, though I was very clear to them that I'll probably stay on just for a year, which is what we did. And you know me, I mean, I wouldn't give a Salman Khan dialogue here, but yeah. but yeah, I mean, I've always tried to stick to whatever I've said as much as I could. So, and I think that's the belief the team has always had, right? Okay, if Harmeet has said this, and honestly, that's been one of the reasons why I could even manage the business from 8,000 miles away. I mean, the bulk of today, 2/3 of our resources sit in India. You remember the time when only 5% sat in India and 95% sat in the US, right? So we took time to build our team in India. But the key is open communication, being transparent. I mean, you spoke about transparency, and that goes across the stakeholder, and more importantly with the team. And second is whether we, when everybody else is saying thumbs up, great, high fives, awesome exit, the employees need to feel the same way. So I think what we did was created a pool to share with the employees. Again, kudos to you guys. Thanks. I mean, I didn't have any pushback from the investors. And we made sure it was something to celebrate for everyone. And again, like I said, to me, exit is a journey, right? Is an event of the journey. So for them, it was okay. We are celebrating the past, and we are looking forward to a bright future. And I think that is what exit is all about, right? Exit is not a comma or a full stop or anything. I don't give it any punctuation. It is just an event to celebrate, both for the people who may decide that it is time for them to move on, as well as for people who've done some hard work and want to move forward.
Pankaj, how did you prepare the organization for the exit, both before and after?
So our business is all for one and one for all kind of situations. So most of our core team, which is I think good 25, 30 people, they've been with us for almost 5 years plus now. And what we did, what we feel we did well was that, of course, sharing the bounties. Of course, that's an obvious thing that happened, which was the most logical thing to do. But in parallel, what we did was we created groups of three, and we did around 75 or 80 odd meetings. So everyone took like 25, 20 to 25 each meetings, and then we did as many one-on-ones, or at least two people talking to a group of 5 people or 6 people. And so even though it was very tedious, but it was a very one-to-one connect with all the rationales, and whatever we had in our thought and our mind for preparing for the future and for the present, and the rationale that we had for taking the decision, we kind of, and we didn't and it wasn't about only exec level plus will happen. It was everybody was involved. So I think that helped a lot. And when somebody who is let's say part of a catalog team, and and there's a group of people who's trying to tell you the whole bit, by the time we were done, I think those 48 hours was super tedious on everyone. But after those 48 hours, I mean, there was a brilliant change in the energy in the organization. I think everybody was a lot more hungrier than they were probably 48 hours ago. So I think that really worked well.
So many in the audience would be wondering, looking at the session, we're talking of exits, and they would have suspected that we will come out, reel out some data on what kind of multiples you got and what the numbers were, and why that multiple and so on. And we spent like last 30 minutes talking of things other than numbers. And I suppose without having these things, numbers don't matter, right? And but let's get back and do some justice to the numbers part of it, because, and I think one thing everyone needs to learn from you guys is, how do you sell a business? Why should anyone buy your business? And more importantly, how do you get people to pay a premium for your business? I think, Rahul, you probably need to go first on this, right?
I haven't sold one, so.
Anyway, you at least got some people exits. So how do you really get people to pay premium for that?
In my opinion, like in every negotiation, this will also be a negotiation that happens every time when you're in the market to raise money, secondary, primary, both. In that negotiation, if both sides feel that they're winning some and losing some, it kind of works out. As long as you create a fair ground for that to happen, that's the facilitation that you as a founder can do. That's what we have done in both scenarios. We've also gone ahead and being extremely transparent and open about what is fair with our external investor who is coming in new, and also the one who is trying to exit at that point in time. So that is one part of the equation. Second part is logistics. There is a lot of logistics involved in getting an exit done. For that, ensuring that the organization is prepped up to be able to share data, clear data, all your legal stuff is taken care of, all this, something that gets brushed under the carpet is super important for the actual exit to happen at any point in time, or any fundraise to also happen. So systems around that, around governance systems that you have in the company has been another key element for us to facilitate. I mean, we did our transaction in less than a month's time. That was amazing. I think it was super fast. So that worked out. So both scenarios. And last unit that has worked is in most of these investors' case, if you look at people who have now on the cap table, we've probably been engaged with them for 3 years or 4 years. So they have seen us grow. They've seen what has happened in FY 18, 19, 20, and they probably come in 20 end or 21 or 22, which makes the actual process faster. When you have to actually pull the trigger, then the process becomes faster. So these are the three things that I think has worked when we have looked at any partial exits or investor exits on the cap table.
Okay, I'm just reminded that we are running short of time, but like Pankaj, why would people buy your business? How did you make it happen? When they could have easily grown it or build it on their own or bought something cheaper?
I think they'll have to answer that question. I mean, I'm not at the liberty or place to answer that.
But you're the magician
yeah,
here, right? You made it happen. So how did you pull it off?
So by the way, talking about being a magician, because we are short on time, because Harmeet gave an anecdote, I'll give one as well for the crowd here. I remember we had a very sizable, in fact, we had 2 private equity deals and we had this strategic deal on the table. And I think I called up Ashish and Vikram and I said that, what do you guys think? And I totally remember, I think that will stay with me forever in life. And they said, dude, this is your call. I mean, whatever you do, you're going to stand by you. So I don't think not a lot of people would say that, considering that, you were a party who had a lot of interest in the outcomes. So yeah, I think the magic doesn't happen by one person alone. The magic is a group magic. And I think bottom line is it's not about how you sell or what you create. I think it's the bottom line is, have you created something which is worthy of somebody to look at and say, hey, there's something bigger can be made out of this. And I think everything just eventually boils down to that. So you keep doing your stuff, man. And at some point of time, as I said, you'll find a better mommy to your kid. I think that's the way it works.
So it's basically years of hard work that leads to something valuable and not something you pick out of the magician's hat. Yeah. I think one last question for all of you. I think barring Rahul, of course. What was it like the day after?
So I've had, so the day after was, sitting down with Monica and having, Monica's my wife, so sitting down with Monica.
Thanks for clarifying that.
And having, yeah, I was like, okay, which one, who Monica? Just wanted to make that clear. So having, enjoying my glass of wine, and I think I was just drinking it too peacefully because 6 months later she comes back and says, listen, now you've got to be part of my venture. So that was, that was my learning. So I'm on to kind of my number 4 now, yeah.
Anubhav?
Yeah, nothing changed actually.
Nothing changed.
I dressed up the same way, drove the same car to office. I think people in the office were a lot more excited about it than I was. I was actually really nervous. But yeah, I think not much changes, honestly.
Rao?
Mixed feelings. One, that whatever you did for 10 years culminated in something. Second is a little bit of, to be fair, a little bit of regret that maybe if you had executed a little better, you would have had a better outcome.
Pankaj, what was it like the day after?
Nothing.
No change?
Just hopped into my car, went to office and said, let's change the annual operating plan. Now it's about time. That's all that happened.
So on that note, I think please join me in really thanking all these wonderful founders, not only for the exits, but the absolute marvelous businesses they have built, and also for the, you can make out the integrity and the values that they have built the business with. So thank you very much, gentlemen.
Yes, thank you everyone for such an intriguing discussion. I think for us the takeaway was trust, transparency, and relationship with the GPs plays a very, very important role for shipping up such exits. Thank you so much, everyone. And requesting for a group photograph, please, and if you could also have the token of appreciation.